President Rodrigo Roa Duterte was elected Philippine president last May 9th. Before becoming president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte was the mayor of Davao City for 22 years. Duterte, as the mayor of Davao City, was pro-LGBTQ rights, pro-Moro and Lumad representation in local government, was pro-assistance and social services for the farmers, the landless, was anti-U.S. military intervention. His popular support in terms of the election, the presidential election, where he basically crushed the opposition in terms of the number of votes that he received, we believe is partly because of his base of support in Mindanao, but also because the Filipino people are tired of traditional politics. They're really seeking change. The Philippines has reached an unprecedented level of crisis. There's an unprecedented level of abject poverty in the country. There's an unprecedented level of government corruption and massive economic and financial inequality in the country. So the people spoke in protest to the status quo by voting for a non-traditional politician like Duterte. Duterte is very much a mixed bag. While we stand with him on the issues of national sovereignty and for kicking U.S. military troops out of the Philippines, we don't stand with him on the summary executions and summary killings of low-level drug addicts and users and dealers coming mainly from the ranks of the poor, the most desperate, and the impoverished. This is unacceptable and needs to be addressed immediately by Duterte. We are calling on President Duterte to follow the rule of law, to uphold due process, and to really target the criminal masterminds who are profiting the most off of the drug industry in the Philippines, which come from the ranks of the oligarchs and the bureaucrats. Without that framework, it's just mainly a war on the poor.
I am a president of a sovereign state, and we have long ceased to be a colony. I do not have any master except the Filipino people.
Since being elected president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte has spoken out several times against U.S. intervention in the Philippines, most recently with his comments made right before the ASEAN summit in Laos.
Good afternoon, sir. Jerome Morales from Reuters News. Sir, there have been concerns on extrajudicial killing, sir, and you will meet leaders. Any line of communication that we have prepared to address this issue in front of our other foreign leaders?
Extrajudicial killing?
Yes, human rights.
To whom shall I address myself to? And who will be asking the questions? May I know?
Like Obama, sir? Like Obama?
You know, the Philippines is not a vassal state. We have long ceased to be a colony of the United States. Alam mo, marami dyan mga sa kolumnista, they look upon Obama and the United States as if we are the lapdogs of this country. You must be respectful. Do not just throw away questions and statements. Putang ina, mumurahin kita dyan sa forum na yan. Mga ganun na yun. Tell that to everybody. Ito mga kolumnista, para ba akong tinatakot? Anak ka na.
President Duterte used the expression putangina, which for Filipinos or those who speak Filipino is a common curse word, and it's inappropriate curse word to use in diplomatic functions, but it's not an expression or a direct attack on any one person in particular. In this case, Obama or his mother. It's basically a curse word, like when you are irritated and you say like fuck or shit. That's how it's used. So it was more a reflection of Duterte's irritation around questions over the US's concern about the killings in the Philippines. And his point, which he also shared in the same press conference, was that the US is a big hypocrite when it comes to the discourse of human rights, international human rights, when the US is responsible for so many human rights violations in the Philippines and particularly in Mindanao. He even said that the US has yet to apologize for the summary executions of Moros at the turn of the century during the US colonial period in the Philippines. And that was his point, was that for the US to criticize his human rights record without acknowledging their own human rights abuses in the country is insincere and something that he's not going to tolerate, and that's why it irritates him. which for us is a valid point. The US is using its concern over the killings in the Philippines under Duterte's drug war as a tactic to drum up popular support for more US militarization and more intervention in the country and to destabilize the Duterte administration. Whenever there's increased US military intervention in the Philippines, there's increased human rights abuses in the country. That's a given. US militarism is always linked to human rights abuses. And yet, those are not the human rights abuses we're talking about in the mainstream media. The mainstream media is focused on the extrajudicial killings with regards to the drug war of Duterte. And while we in Bayan do agree that extrajudicial killings are wrong and they should be stopped, and we are telling that to the Duterte administration, the point of view of the U.S. is completely different. The U.S. has a very particular geopolitical strategy in the Asia-Pacific region, and the Philippines is crucial to that strategy. The Philippines historically has been a stronghold of the U.S. military because the U.S. military has to control the shipping lanes in the South China Sea. So this whole pivot to Asia is not really about protecting the region from China. It's really about protecting the U.S. export market in the region because the Asia-Pacific region is the largest market for U.S. exports, worth up to $600 billion in U.S. exports. And because we're experiencing a global economic crisis and China's economic rivalry to U.S. economic domination in the region is real, the U.S. has to flex its military might in the region in order to show that it still controls the shipping lanes, it still controls the South China Sea, and it still controls global commerce.
I repeat, the Philippines will pursue an independent foreign policy. We will observe and must insist on the time-honored principles of sovereignty, sovereign equality, non-interference, and the commitment to a peaceful settlement of disputes to best serve our people and protect the interests of our country.
This is really the most threatening language because the Obama administration cannot afford to lose the Philippines as a reliable stooge in the region. So the fact that Duterte is actually standing up for economic sovereignty is not being covered by the mainstream media because that's not the rhetoric that the U.S. wants us to know. No one is talking about the fact that the peace process has been resumed between the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. After 15 years of being stalled, the selectivity of topics that the corporate media chooses speaks directly to corporate interests, wanting more military intervention in the country to basically safeguard foreign investments, to safeguard the fact that there are many corporations that want to extract and develop the mineral wealth of the country, of the Philippines, for themselves and deny development for the Filipino people. I would urge him to tackle those big problems, poverty and landlessness in the country, because for me, those are the fundamental problems in the country that lead to the crisis. I would urge him to stop his tactics of allowing for the police to just go crazy in shooting drug dealers in the country, mainly from the urban poor. I would urge him, as a lawyer, as a former prosecutor, to uphold the rule of law and to uphold due process. But I would also commend him for being decisive in resuming the peace negotiations between the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. And I would urge him to remember the positions he took when he was the mayor of Davao against U.S. CIA operations, U.S. drone exercises, U.S. intervention in Mindanao, and apply them as the president of the Philippines, and to really scrap all of those agreements with the U.S. government that allow for U.S. military presence in the country, like the EDCA, like the VFA, like the MDT, like the Balikatan exercises.